The Great Hymn of Aten is the very first of its kind during a very controversial time in Egypt. Prior to this time where this hymn came out, there was a lot of freedom in Egypt. You could worship any god that you chose at any temple that you chose. You could even add new gods if you saw fit and necessary. So there was a lot of freedom. Pharaohs were also the connection between gods and the people. So they tried to make decisions that were not only good for the people, but abiding by the laws of their gods. The most popular god at that time was Aram, something like that. Anywho, along came this pharaoh, Akhamaten, and he changed everything. So the Great Hymn of Aten is the first hymn and the first public acknowledgement of a single and only one God. It's the first recorded history of monotheism. So scholars credit this pharaoh with the first monotheistic religion. It predates God that Christians and Jews know of by 2,000 years. So it's a major milestone in history, not just Egyptian history, but religious history altogether. Now, this pharaoh did not see himself the way pharaohs of the past had seen themselves. This pharaoh believed he was a god reincarnate. So over the next 9 years, he made major changes to Egyptian society. This hymn came out, and the hymn states that Aten is the creator of life. He's the only God. He's the sole creator. He's the sole God. Everything that is because of him. He has birthed all plants, all animals, all people, every day, every night, all the work, everything is because of Aten. So this was the first time such a proclamation had ever been made. He went about changing Egyptian society entirely. Over the next 9 years, he would bring temples down and he would put temples up. His new temples faced the east because that's where the sun rises. So they would rise into the temple. And people faced religious persecution for the very first time in Egyptian history. So all their practices eliminated. There used to be what they called cults. The cults were the same thing as Christians that we think of, Catholics, Pentecostals, Baptist. That's what a cult was for them. Like, it was how you praised your God and how you chose to worship. So now there was only one God, and that was the only one God that you were allowed to worship, and that was it. He began taking down temples that belonged to other gods. Priests were not allowed to practice the worship of these gods. And he even had their names stricken from the temples and from the stones that told the story of other gods. So he's also called the heretic king. It was believed that he may have been mad. They said that he had many physical ailments and mental ailments. But then other historians also credit him for being the first true individual, for being the first free thinker. He was the first person to break out of the mold that was seen as normal and fit in society. So he made drastic changes and he persecuted people who didn't believe. And because he believed he was a reincarnated God, he also found the task of being Pharaoh beneath him. So also the relationships and alliances that had been built over a long time, and Egypt was a very prosperous place at this point in time, they began to break down because he was not communicating. He was not responding. He was not sending military forces to his alliances when they were under attack. He was not responding and cooperating. He wasn't holding court. So there were a lot of things that he was doing that was unacceptable for the role of Pharaoh. So it was definitely a controversial time, but he is credited for the very first monotheistic religion, and the Great Hymn of Aten is the first hymn or writing that was ever made supporting one God in a religion. So it's a milestone marker as far as that goes. Really good read. There's a lot of information behind it, so definitely check it out. Thanks.